Hello, thanks for joining me. Today I wanted to talk briefly about um, a Wargame Simulator feature that I think might really help with the popularity of wargames, and mostly the introduction of players to wargames. As I've built out this system, I've been thinking about the idea of being able to onboard new players quicker, easier, and in a more relaxed environment than it would be if they were to go to a game shop for the first time with new or partially built models and ask someone to teach them the game. So I'm kind of thinking about this tutorial system and how it would work. I remember when I was getting into War Machine and Hordes about 10 years ago, that there was a group of people called press gangers, and their entire job, at least to me it seemed, would be to introduce new players to the game of War Machine and Hordes. They knew how to play the game, and they had given many tutorials before, and they provided a nice, relaxing, easy experience because that is what they did. That is how they introduced themselves to new players, and new players felt comfortable asking these people questions. And while in kind of the modern wargaming, especially days, and with modern wargaming and modern tabletop gaming, most players are very nice and would gladly give a tutorial to new players, but getting the courage or ability up to ask someone to teach them the game might be too much for new players, and the complexity of the game and the complexity of the hobby might alienate new players so much so that they're never really introduced to the local gaming stores and the local communities. So I was thinking, given some features of Wargame Simulator, we may be able to mimic or build a tutorial system that they could play through in the comfort of their own home, where they can use partially built models and not feel like they're using up their opponent's time, or without even having to look up the rules, they know they can get a custom introduction to the game, a custom onboarding that directs them instead of them having to figure it out, and just making that entire process a little bit easier. And so I'm going to show how I would go about building a tutorial system given the current set of Wargame Simulator features. So I'm going to create a new game, and I'm going to name it Warhammer 40k tutorial, an introduction to Wargame Simulator, something like that. And this is just create my game. And I'm going to add in the description, quick introduction to the basics of Warhammer 40k. And I'm going to change a couple of these game settings. The first thing I'm going to change is I'm going to change it to a digital map. That simply allows us to kind of build our tutorial system in a generic digital environment and then test it out on the physical tabletop. But since we don't know exactly what things will look like for any player who picks up the game, they may be using books for terrain or partially built models, or using their kitchen countertop instead of a specific background neoprene mat. Whatever system they want to use or whatever system they have available, we want to make sure that our generic digital game can fit onto their playing environment. I'm also going to switch on use dice camera. Rolling dice is fun. This just allows you just to roll physical dice in the game currently at specific points, but that will be expanded in the future. And I'm also going to turn on armies go in order. This is a simple way to reduce the randomness at the beginning of the game. For any tutorial system, you kind of want to control what's happening. You want the player who is learning the game to go first. You want you want to be able to control which deployment zone they're in. This would especially become the case, maybe not so much in tutorials, but in narrative games, where maybe you have a narrative siege and you want the defenders to go first and you want the defending army to have a specific deployment zone. So this simply turns off the randomization of deployment zones and who goes first at the beginning of the game. And it instead mimics the order that the armies are uploaded in. So I'm going to save those changes. And then I'm going to go over to my army tab. When teaching a new player, you don't want a big complex game. You really want 1, maybe 2 units so you can get used to looking at unit statistics and how they are incorporated into movement and dice rolling. You don't need 15 units per army and different detachment rules and confusing one-of scenarios. So we're going to build something really generic. I have, for the sake of building the tutorial, grabbed a couple army lists. A Space Marine, which only has a single unit. And you can see that here, it's an Intercessor Squad. And we're just going to assign it a transponder while we're waiting here. And this is going to be the army that the player controls. Space Marines generally have a lot of representation throughout the community. They're all in all the starter boxes, and if they're going to have physical models that match, likely it'll be an Intercessor Squad. So we're just going to give that this, and we're going to save that, just so that they have a transponder assigned to them. And this is the one that I just have. I know I have this one on the table behind me, so I'm just using it as an example. Now, the second army is going to be a group of Tyranids. The starting box for this edition was Space Marines vs. Tyranids, and they'll likely have some. So, and I also wanted to include one kind of Imperium army and one Xenos army. And the Gene Stealers were an appropriate fit given that they don't have ranged weapons, and so they're unlikely to, and it just makes the kind of target dummies that the player is going to be shooting at that much simpler. I'm going to give these ones an A. Now, for this one, I also want a fair amount of predictability. This army is going to be played by an AI. So the human's not going to be playing both sides. They're going to be playing against a computer opponent. And so we want that computer opponent to become a little bit more predictable. And we do that by, I want it to be aggressive in that I always want it to be coming across the board. It's a melee unit. It should be aggressive if it's against a single shooting unit. And so we're going to make it aggressive. We're also going to turn up its personality intensity. This is a variable that can often be misunderstood, but it kind of refers to the weighting of a more optimal game versus a more narrative game. The more narrative game being listening to the personality type and the text description that goes in the unit personality. For example, this unit should always move towards the enemy Intercessor Squad. This little introduction has some integrations with an LLM, but it just helps weight the decisions that the actual optimized AI does based on whether the decision is more similar to this text or whether the decision is more aligned to being optimal, which would be more in the 1 category. But we're going to put it up to 5. So this unit is constantly seeking to attack the Intercessor Squad. And that will just give it a little bit of predictability when we're building this simulation, this tutorial simulation. And importantly, I need to go to the army configuration here and make sure that this is computer controlled. Okay. So the next thing we want to do is we want to begin building and modifying our map. We want a really simple map. The generic map that pops up kind of in this digital world has a kind of this cross pattern for your objectives, some random abandoned ruins throughout, and diagonal deployment zones. And that's really not what we want to play with a new player, especially when there's only 1 unit per army. So we're going to select a much simpler objective layout. I made this simple objective layout called Simple Tutorial. And as you can see, it only has 2 objectives. They're placed 18 inches apart in the middle of the tabletop. I choose this mostly because 2 objectives is easier than 5. And if they're playing on a kitchen table or on some other environment that's smaller than a standard Warhammer 40k board, you can still fit those objectives on it. And you want to make sure the entire game space would fit in a smaller environment than a typical player who has more experience would have access to. So we're just going to set those up. We're not going to play with terrain. And the deployment zone doesn't really matter, but I'm just going to select a simple deployment zone. So this is essentially our map setup right now. 2 deployment zones, we're going to be basically ignoring those. In fact, I'll get rid of them. And essentially the entire map setup is going to be 2 objectives. So now, the next thing we're going to do is, in the interest of predictability and understanding and explaining a kind of like walking a player through the game, we want it to be predictable again. So I'm going to, this is a brief one. I'm going to go back to my map, and I'm going to pre-deploy some units. In that, in narrative games, it might, and in tutorial games, it might be helpful to know where units should be deployed. I'm going to start with our Space Marines. I'm going to put the Space Marine squad about 6 inches back from Objective 1. Okay. And we're going to place our Tyranid Gene Stealers right on Objective 2. And I do this because I know these are 18 inches apart, and I know that the Intercessor squad has a range of 24 inches on their ranged weapons. And I want this unit to be just outside of the range, well, of the Intercessor squad range, which is 24 inches. And so that just ensures that the player will have to move within range in order to have a line of sight or range on the Gene Stealer squad. So I'm just pre-deploying the units, and I'm going to leave directions to the player of where they should place the units and objectives on the battlefield. But we'll take care of that in just a minute. Okay. Now, one feature that really makes the tutorial system work and work well are these events. And events are, well, I'll go over them. They're map elements that can be triggered through various means. For example, you might have a location-based event that triggers if a unit gets within 3 inches of it. And the triggers can do lots of different things, but in this case, we just want a take Objective 1 event, and it will trigger when Objective 1 is taken. And importantly, it will also, it's going to be location-based. Instead of triggering at a specific time or phase, or triggering based on a given action, it's going to trigger off a specific area of the map. And it'll trigger when something gets within 3 inches of it. We're going to have it trigger 1 time only. And it's going to display a message. It's going to send a message to the player. And that message is going to pop up in the player chat, and it'll also be audible to the player. And this message will be just, congrats, you have, my spelling is terrible right now. You have captured Objective 1. All right, that's all this is going to say. When a player ends their turn or ends a movement within range, within 3 inches of this event map feature, then it's going to send the player a message. And this message is going to say, congrats, you have captured player 1. Now, we could just send a text message and display it in the chat, but we can add a little bit more dynamicness to our game. I'm going to give it a voice. I'm just going to give it one of these voice styles, and I'm going to generate our voice preview. You don't need to do this. It's just a little bit of a, if you want to add an additional element to your game, it's something that you can do. So we've generated this voice, and we can hit the play.
Congrats, you have captured Objective 1.
Okay, so that's what a player will hear when they land on Objective 1. Okay, so we're going to create this event. We're going to place it on a map. Now we want to place it right on Objective 1. Okay, and we've done that. You can kind of, you can kind of see the events back there behind Objective 1. And if you come within this range of the event, which is 3 inches, the same as Objective 1, the event will trigger, and it'll send that message. So we're going to save our one event, and we actually want to go test out our system right now. We want to see if that actually pops up when a user gets within 3 inches of our objective. So since we're kind of operating this liminal in this digital world, we're just going to start our game. And we can kind of work our way to the movement phase where the player can move their unit onto objective 1 and hopefully see this event that's like, yeah, you did it. All right. So we're going to start our battle. There's no deployments that need to be done during our deployment phase because we kind of pre-deployed these units in specific locations. So we're just going to start our battle. There's nothing to do in the command phase, so we're just going to click through it. We're in the movement phase, and we can begin our movement actions. And movement in this digital world, which is kind of the testing world, is simply dragging and moving a unit. They can move to anywhere. There's no rules enforced on it. So right now I'm just going to move them about the 6 inches forward, but I'm going to make sure they end within 3 inches of the objective, and I'm going to refresh this. I'm going to take this unit, move it within 3, and then that is disappointing. It's letting me move the Tyrannid army, but settings. All right, so I've run into a bug here. It's going to be a pretty, oops, cancel. I'm going to go back into my game. There's a bug that occurred. So I'm going to settings. I'm going to restart my game. Obviously something happened where with how I uploaded the armies, and we're just going to reset our armies real quick. I feel like it's correct. Okay, so for some reason it's thinking it's the AI's turn, and I don't know why. Like we can go through the AI's movement, but it's... So we're going to have to configure the turn order real quick when we get back to the game. But this will kind of show us the general functionality. In this case, the AI is actually moving, and the AI is moving. Okay, all they did was they secured objective 2. They moved more onto the objective. And so we can end our movement phase. We can advance to the rest of the phases because the Gene Stealers don't have... They're not going to be within range to charge. They're not going to be in combat, so they're just going to advance to the next of their turn. So now we're on to the human player turn. For some reason it had there's a little bug we discovered. It has the AI army going first, and that's something I'll correct in an actual game. Well, in an actual tutorial. Now, one interesting thing we did see is as the Gene Stealer unit moved, it did produce kind of a talking head for them, kind of as an announcement that they did something. And you can kind of see what it says down here, and we can play that.
Asterisk, hiss asterisk, the hunt continues.
Okay, so it generated a terrible voice line. We will fix that. I guess it generated asterisks to make the hiss italicized. So that's another kind of bug we found out, but it's just when units move, there are voices that are generated for them. It's kind of like an announcement for what they did that are tied to what they do. But now we're going to go check out our actual event. That's why we're here. And the player is going to move their squad onto that objective. And we're going to finalize their move. And what this will essentially do is is they'll essentially take objective 1, and you can see that. Congrats, you've captured objective 1 in our movement phase. We can play that. Well,
Congrats. You have captured objective 1.
so that's what it kind of plays when you take objective 1, like the event we described. The Intercessor Squad also moved, so it kind of gets the same talking head. The voice for the Space Marine Army is...
For the Emperor, advancing swiftly.
Very feminine, so we'll need to change that up as well. But essentially, you can kind of see how units will announce that they did something. This isn't as important for human-controlled units, but it really does give some information about what an AI is doing. It's kind of like an indicator that they did something. If you're not on a computer and don't want to press these play buttons, these events can be played through the speaker on the phone that's kind of looking down at the battlefield. And that's just kind of a way to kind of give some audible announcements that something has happened. It just helps the players manage the game. So at this point in time, we're going to go back to our tutorial. And what we want to do with our tutorial is we're going to restart our game so we can get back to kind of game setup and start designing our tutorial again. To make things easier, I'm going to delete both armies and just kind of reset our armies. We're going to try to do the exact same thing, like a crazy person. So we're going to upload our 1 unit thing. We're going to give this a transponder. Great. We're going to save that. And then we're going to upload our second army. And we're going to save this. We're going to turn up the personality. We're going to say, always move towards the Intercessor Squad. This. All right. So there we have our army. And we are also going to make the army itself kind of controlled by a computer. Where's that save? Yep. All right. So now, hopefully, if we were to start the game, we're going to start. Oh, because we have new armies, we have to go through deployment again. All right. We're going to deploy this guy here. Fine, is this deployment? AI can deploy. At this point in time, it's not going to deploy where we want it to because it's limited in its decisions to the actual deployment zone. We can see we have an idea for where it wants to deploy, and it's going to, and it'll deploy in its deployment zone at the very far back. That's what how the AI would deploy normally. So we can kind of see the order, what looked correct. And we're going to settings, restart our game one more time so we can get back to designing our tutorial. Now for our tutorial, I'm pretty sure this is where the bug will creep in again, and I will fix it after this. After this game, but I'm going to deploy my Intercessor Squad once again 6 inches behind. And I'm going to put the Tyranid Gene Sealers right here. And we're going to save kind of that pre-deployment again. Now I'm fairly confident if I were to start my game, we're going to see that the turn order is going to be our second army going first again. And no, it's okay. It's actually working. I don't know what went wrong the last time, but we'll be able to move this onto here. And see we will now end our movement phase. And we're able to kind of see the message that we captured the objective. Sorry that I took some time kind of going out of my way to kind of fix that weird bug that appeared. I will go into finding out and digging down that whatever happened there here in the future. But okay, we're going back and we want to make this a tutorial for new players. So we're going to add some more events in. Probably a popular event type for building a tutorial, or I guess, coaching module would be a time-based event. So give movement instructions. And in this case, we want to send the user a message about what they should do during their movement phase. And that is going to be, it's your movement phase. Each unit may move up to its movement characteristic. The movement characteristic of the intercessor squad is 6 inches. So you now move your intercessor squad 6 inches towards objective 1 and and finalize their movement. All right. So that's going to be a message that displays, and this is going to be time triggered. What that means is that during their movement phase, when they're allowed to move their units, it's going to give them this message. And we also want to kind of keep with our voice, so we're going to generate some voice message for this. So we're going to wait for that to generate, and then we'll kind of play it back so we can see how it sounds.
It's your movement phase. Each unit may move up to its movement characteristic. The movement characteristic of the intercessor squad is 6 inches. Now move your intercessor squad 6 inches towards objective 1 and finalize their movement.
I think that's a reasonable, really reasonable message to send to a new character while they're during their movement phase. So we're going to create this event. I'm just checking. Okay, yep. We're going to create this event. And we're going to save that event. And now we're going to go test out that event. That's just this is an example of an event that could give direction to a player. So we're going to start our game. Again, we'll just advance through our deployment phase and our command phase because there's just nothing to do. And now here we go. We're entering our movement phase. And we can see now that we have control and are allowed to move our units, it says, well, we can listen to it.
It's your movement phase. Each unit may move up to its movement characteristic. The movement characteristic of the intercessor squad is 6 inches. Now move your intercessor squad 6 inches towards objective 1 and finalize their movement.
I think a new player would be very interested in receiving that sort of information. Oh, we're going to move this towards objective 1. We're going to capture it. Okay. We're going to end our movement phase. Since we've moved everything, we're going to be directed. That's really the only action we can take is to end it. And we're going to advance to the next phase. Okay. All right. Now, for some reason, all right. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to settings. We're going to restart our game. We can kind of see that sort of event system works. So now we're going to restart our game. And we're going to kind of explore one more event system that might help out. So we have this take objective 1 event. We have the give movement instructions event. And they should both be available to players. All right. So we're going to create we're going to create a couple more events right now. This is going to be a wrong way event. It's also going to be location based, but instead of being a point on the map, it's going to be an area or a polygon. And this is going to say, well, you trying to leave the battlefield? move your unit towards objective 1. And this is just going to be a little warning to the player. We're going to do the same voice. We're going to generate our voice. This time we won't listen to it. And we're going to place this on a map. Now this is a different type of event. It's not a point. It's just kind of like a shape. And we're going to create it. It's going to be pretty large. I'm going to put it kind of all around this area. And what will happen is if the player ever moves into any of these areas, like ever enters this space on the battlefield, it will announce that event. Okay. So it's there's the space. If they move into it, that event will happen. And we're also going to create one more event that might give some information. This is going to be an army info. And this will just be we're going to have this be an event that's tied to an action. So something that takes place in the game. In this case, is if they go look at their army tab. Okay. And this will give some sort of text like, this is the army review screen. Here you can look at your units and your opponent's units to determine, well, for vital information. Look at the player 1 army now and find the intercessor squad. Pay special attention to its characteristics. All right. We can also say you don't have to memorize this information, but a leader will know what his squad is capable of. All right. So now we're going to generate the voice for this one as well. And then, so this event will happen, and I'll show you exactly what will happen once it's finished creating. We can listen to the preview.
This is the Army Review screen. Here you can look at your units and your opponent's units for vital information. Look at the player 1 army now and find the intercessor squad. Pay special attention to its characteristics. You don't have to memorize this information, but a leader will know what his squad is capable of.
There we go. So it'll just give that information, and we're going to create this event. And this event, we're going to save all these events now. This event is going to trigger when they visit this army tab. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure I'm just going to reload the game real quick, make sure that event is kind of loaded in. And if I visit now, I'm going to give it a second for the whole game to load up. And if I visit the army tab, technically we should see this event trigger. There we go. So this event will trigger and it'll give them information and a little play button, and it'll automatically play. It's telling them they should go down to the intercessor squad and check it out for its unit characteristics, right? This is what the squad is capable of. All right. So that is kind of, I don't want to cover creating the entire tutorial, but that's kind of the tutorial creation system. And in the next video, we'll go through kind of testing out the tutorial on the physical tabletop. Nobody wants to learn a game by looking at some generic kind of like distasteful map visualization. They want to play with models on the tabletop, and we'll kind of get into that and integrating the camera into the tutorial in the next video. So thank you so much, and I look forward to making that next video.